At first glance, the story seems deceptively simple. A former duchess, long removed from formal royal duty, quietly reappearing at the edges of an institution that once kept her at arm's length. Yet beneath the soft light of Windsor's evening gates, another truth glows faintly. Sarah Ferguson has become one of the monarchy's most enduring paradoxes. She entered royal life with a warmth that unsettled tradition, her laughter filling rooms that had grown accustomed to restraint. For a moment, she was the breeze that loosened the curtains of formality. But the years that followed reshaped her path. Praise turned to scrutiny, and goodwill gave way to headlines that lingered far longer than her titles. And still, remarkably, she remains. Invited to gatherings that should have excluded her. Photographed alongside a family that once seemed ready to move on. Attached, gently, persistently, to a monarchy redefining itself under a new king. Her reinvention came through steady human work. Children's books, charitable projects, the unbroken devotion of motherhood. Yet her setbacks travelled faster. Debts, misjudgments, and the shadow cast by her former husband, whose own controversies continue to ripple outward. As King Charles shapes a slimmer, more deliberate monarchy, her presence raises a subtle question. The palace neither fully embraces nor distances her. Instead, it holds her in an ambiguous space where history, loyalty, and public memory meet. Perhaps that is why she fascinates still. In Fergie's uncertain footing, the monarchy finds a reflection of its own, balancing past missteps with the hope of renewal, carrying contradictions it cannot entirely resolve. And beneath it all lies a quiet unease. In a world where silence holds value, what unspoken debt still binds her to the crown? In the years that followed her divorce from Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson stepped into a quieter world. One without the protection of royal machinery, but also without its limitations. It was here, beyond the palace gates, that she began the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding herself. Not through grandeur or spectacle, but through the small, steady acts of a woman learning how to be seen again on her own terms. Her first steps were surprisingly gentle. Children's books, written with warmth and pockets of mischief, softened the edges of a public image that had grown harsh with scrutiny. Documentaries allowed a glimpse of vulnerability, a kind of candour rarely associated with royal life. And as she leaned into this more approachable persona, something shifted. Audiences began to encounter not a former duchess, but a person. Someone who laughed easily, who acknowledged her missteps, who carried the memory of a title with a kind of humble weight. Yet every appearance she made, from talk shows to charity galas, served a dual purpose. They provided income, yes, but they also became the bricks of a carefully reconstructed identity. Each interview, each public gesture, added a layer of humanity to a figure once defined by her excesses. She seemed, at times, to be rebuilding not just a career, but a relationship with a country that had watched her stumble in full view. Still, a delicate truth threaded through it all. Fergie's image was never entirely her own. In the royal world, perception is a shared currency. Her choices, however personal, were inevitably measured against the institution she had once been part of. A misjudged endorsement or an over-eager public moment could be read as a burden. A sincere act of charity could be framed as a service to the family that no longer formally claimed her. She lived constantly in the shadow of comparison. Her achievements weighed against royal expectation as much as public memory. At the centre of this delicate balancing act remained Prince Andrew. They described one another with an intimacy that puzzled critics and comforted admirers. She called him her best friend. He called her family. Their enduring closeness, sometimes dismissed as unusual, revealed a dependency that the palace could neither fully approve nor outright condemn. A separation that never quite separated them became one of the monarchy's quiet contradictions, a reminder of how entangled personal loyalty and public duty can become. Through all of this, Beatrice and Eugenie were her compass. Their loyalty to their mother softened public perception in ways that no interview could. When they married, when they became parents, when they stepped into their own public roles, Fergie naturally re-entered the royal frame. Not through invitation, but through belonging, the kind that is emotional rather than constitutional. In her reinvention, she emerged as something rare in royal storytelling. An unvarnished survivor, not polished by protocol, but shaped by persistence. Her journey offered a reminder that beneath the monarchy's ceremonial veneer lie very human foundations: love, loss, mistake, forgiveness, and the continual act of trying again. And so her rebuilt image, cautious and imperfect as it was, carried its own quiet strength. A strength born not from titles regained, but from the enduring truth that reinvention, however untidy, is sometimes the only path forward. For all the warmth that defined Sarah Ferguson in public, her private world carried a weight she seldom allowed others to see. Behind the ease of her laughter and the openness of her interviews, a quieter struggle pressed against the surface, one shaped not by scandal alone, but by something more ordinary and far more unforgiving: financial strain. Debt became a persistent shadow, one that stretched across years and continents. Business ventures faltered, sometimes through miscalculation, sometimes through misplaced trust, and sometimes simply through the unpredictable realities of commercial life. Each setback left its own imprint, eroding the stability she worked so carefully to rebuild. And in the background, the memory of privilege lingered, a reminder of expectations she could no longer meet, and standards against which she would always be measured. Her loyalty to Prince Andrew only deepened these complications. It was unwavering, deeply personal, and, to many, quietly baffling. She remained close when it might have been easier to step away. She defended him when public sentiment turned. And in choosing proximity, she inherited burdens that were never truly her own. Observers noted how her efforts to shield him blurred into the risks she took on herself. Risks that chipped away at the fragile redemption she had spent years constructing. There were stories, at times uncomfortable, of unpaid bills and hurried settlements. Reports surfaced of foreign business ties, some ill-advised, others misunderstood, but all adding to the perception of a woman in a constant balancing act. Quiet arrangements were made, debts were absorbed, and the pressure of maintaining an outward calm weighed heavily. Through it all, the palace kept a polite distance. It did not intervene, but neither did it sever ties. Fergie remained in a liminal space, close enough to be judged as royal, but distant enough to bear the consequences alone. Her silence became a form of currency. She never criticised the institution, never spoke publicly about the strains of belonging without protection. In a family where discretion is survival, her restraint was valuable. Yet it also revealed something uneasy. That loyalty, when unreciprocated, can demand more of a person than they can comfortably give. There is a quiet ache in this part of her story. A woman rebuilding herself while carrying burdens she rarely acknowledged, navigating a landscape where dignity had to be preserved not just in public, but in private moments of uncertainty and fear. Her vulnerabilities exposed a truth the monarchy seldom admits aloud: that the cost of remaining close, yet never fully inside, is paid not in ceremony, but in silence. And as the institution evolves under a new reign, her experience lingers as a sober reminder. Loyalty is cherished, but loyalty without armour comes at a price only the loyal ever truly understand. Every story of reinvention carries a quiet risk that the past, however carefully managed, will find its way back to the surface. For Sarah Ferguson, that moment arrived abruptly, with the sharpness of a curtain pulled open before she was ready. Whether through leaked conversations, uncomfortable revelations about financial dealings, or the exposure of private anxieties made public, the effect was the same. A sudden rupture in the image she had worked so patiently to restore. The reaction was immediate. Headlines that once approached her with gentle curiosity hardened overnight. Broadcasters questioned her judgment with a tone that felt colder, less forgiving. Commentators, recalling missteps from earlier decades, framed this moment not as an isolated lapse, but as a continuation, a familiar pattern resurfacing in a new and far less forgiving age. It was as though the country exhaled in disappointment, recognising not the novelty of the incident, but the echo of something it had seen before. Within the monarchy, the response was quieter, but no less telling. The institution, ever attuned to public mood, shifted subtly away. Invitations became fewer, appearances more selective. It was not framed as censure, nor presented as consequence. Instead, it resembled a deliberate pause, a moment for the public storm to pass, for the institution to align itself at a safe distance, while maintaining the necessary politeness of continued connection. The signals were delicate, but unmistakable. Yet the most significant collapse was not procedural, it was personal. For a woman who had rebuilt herself through candour, who had allowed the public into her vulnerabilities, and who relied on visibility as both livelihood and identity, the return of scrutiny cut with familiar sharpness. It revived the early 1990s in a way she had long hoped to leave behind. The relentless flash of cameras, the coolness of commentary, the uneasy sense that control over her own narrative had slipped once more from her grasp. But this time, the landscape had changed. The world had moved into a digital era where reactions were instant and judgment amplified. Nuance struggled to survive in a climate that rewarded certainty. Mistakes that once unfolded over days now cascaded within hours. The space to explain, to recalibrate, to breathe, all of it narrowed. And yet, even in this harsher climate, one detail endured. The palace did not sever its connection to her. It kept the door ajar, offering neither full embrace nor complete exclusion. In that restraint lay a quiet recognition. Moments of collapse do not belong solely to the individual. They reverberate through the institution that once shaped them, reflecting its complexities as much as hers. The press machines rolled, the grey London sky hovered, and the faint click of distant cameras seemed to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth, that once again, Fergie stood at the centre of a storm she never fully escaped, but in a world now quicker to judge than to understand. In the wake of any royal crisis, there is a moment where the noise fades and a quieter recalibration begins. It is in this subdued phase, away from headlines and commentary, that relationships shift, allegiances settle, and the future is quietly renegotiated. For Sarah Ferguson, the aftermath of her latest collapse followed a familiar pattern: a retreat from the spotlight, a return to the private sphere, and the slow process of piecing together a life that had once again been unsettled. She leaned, as she often has, on her daughters. Beatrice and Eugenie remained her constant North Star, affectionate, unwavering, and unembarrassed by the scrutiny that surrounded their mother. Their loyalty offered her a kind of grounding that neither the public nor the palace could provide. And in doing so, they shaped the public's understanding of her. Their gentle presence softened narratives that might otherwise have hardened with judgment. The image of the three of them together, candid, affectionate, unforced, served as a reminder that beneath the royal titles and decades of commentary, this was a family trying to care for one another. For Prince Andrew, the aftermath was more complex. Fergie's closeness offered a stabilising presence during a time when his public and private worlds were fracturing. To some observers, her loyalty appeared to reinforce the difficulties surrounding his future. To others, it was the single thread that tethered him to a semblance of normal life. In the pressured environment of Royal Lodge, where reputation and reality collided, her presence acted as both comfort and complication. For King Charles, the situation required careful navigation. His vision of a slimmed-down monarchy demanded clarity, fewer roles, tighter structures, and firmer boundaries. At the same time, severing ties with Fergie entirely risked unsettling family harmony at a moment when unity remained a prized, if elusive, commodity. Her daughters, though not working royals, held respected positions in the public consciousness. To exclude their mother completely would have raised questions that the monarchy did not need to answer in its early years of transition. And so, an unspoken arrangement emerged. Fergie would not return to official duties, nor would she be elevated into the public-facing core of the monarchy. But neither would she be pushed to its outer edges. She would attend selectively, present enough to maintain continuity, absent enough to preserve institutional distance. Her loyalty, demonstrated through decades of silence and self-restraint, would continue to be acknowledged quietly, even if never formally rewarded. In this delicate aftermath, a deeper truth surfaced. For those on the monarchy's margins, distance can act as a form of protection, shielding individuals from pressures they could not withstand. Equally, inclusion, however limited, can operate as strategy, preserving bonds that remain emotionally significant even when they hold no constitutional weight. What remained for Fergie was a kind of bittersweet resilience, recovery without triumph, survival without celebration. A life rebuilt once more, not entirely restored, but steadied in the soft glow of the few relationships that had never let her slip away. In the soft light of hindsight, Sarah Ferguson's story begins to look less like a sequence of scandals and recoveries, and more like a quiet meditation on resilience. She has become, in a way few anticipated, a symbol of the contradictions the modern monarchy cannot entirely resolve. Perhaps this is why King Charles keeps her within reach, even as he reshapes the institution with sharper lines and clearer boundaries. She embodies the tension between image and reality, flawed yet enduring, a figure shaped by missteps but never fully defined by them. Fergie has never claimed perfection. What she has shown, consistently, is an unwillingness to disappear. Misjudged at times, sincere at others, she moves through public life with a kind of humble persistence. Her warmth may have once unsettled royal expectations, but it also revealed something the monarchy has long struggled to project: unpolished humanity. For Beatrice and Eugenie, she remains the constant, the one presence in their lives that never retreated, never hid, never withheld her devotion, even when circumstances around them shifted sharply. Their affection anchors her story, reminding the public that behind every headline sits a mother navigating the fragile balance between dignity and survival. For Andrew, she is a rare thread of continuity, a link to a shared history that existed before reputational collapse and global scrutiny. And for Charles, she offers something subtler but equally valuable, a demonstration that loyalty, however complicated, can still carry weight in an era when the monarchy depends on both symbolism and sincerity to endure. But it is the institution itself that confronts the most delicate question. Can a monarchy built on ceremony and carefully curated distance embrace someone whose greatest strength is her authenticity? Someone who has lived through its shadows, faltered in its glare, yet continues to move toward it with a kind of quiet, unwavering hope. Her story ends not with triumph, nor with defeat, but with understanding. That redemption is not a straight path. And loyalty, especially in the royal world, is often spoken in silence rather than proclamation. As sunlight slips through a half-open curtain, illuminating a sealed envelope on a polished desk, there is a sense of unfinishedness, of a line still being written. Fergie continues to walk her tightrope. The monarchy, watching from its own delicate height, remains undecided on how far it is willing to reach,